I joined the company in 2003. I wasn't as an advisor thinking, I want to be the MD one day. I wanted to do a job that I thought was meaningful. I wanted to do something where I could help people.
You're sort of acquiring some knowledge and skills as you progress, but your passion for sort of helping people and working with people was the core and the starting point.
I was the only woman on the board, and I was the youngest person on the board as well. And I was mentally sort of grappling with the idea that you are responsible in quite a different way as a director. I remember somebody else who I was working with to help find work, and he hadn't left his house for many years. It was quite clear to me that he was such a long way away from being able to go to work. So I learned that every person that's in front of you is at a different point in their journey, and the best way to help them is to help them take that next step. And I also learned early on that creating a safe environment for people is massively important for them to be able to do well. The last thing that you want to do as a manager is create a sort of sense of fear about failure in that regard.
If you're thinking of a young person in their 20s, how do you get noticed? How do you make yourself the best candidate?
I think the first thing to do.
Welcome to All About Business with me, James Reed, the podcast that covers everything about business, management, and leadership. Every episode, I sit down with different guests who've bootstrapped companies, masterminded investment models, or built a business empire. They're leaders in their field, and they're here to give you top insights and actionable advice so that you can apply their ideas to your own career or business venture. Climbing to the top of the corporate ladder can be challenging, especially from the viewpoint of an entry-level position. With stiff competition and limited opportunities for promotion, you'll need a surefire plan to get ahead. So how can you prove to your managers that you have what it takes to lead your organization to greatness? And is it even possible to land a senior role without changing companies multiple times? Joining me today on All About Business is Donna Murrell. Donna is the Managing Director of Reed in Partnership, which helps transform people and their communities through employment, well-being, and social impact services. Donna began her career at Reed in Partnership over 20 years ago as an entry-level employment advisor and worked her way to the top through hard work, dedication to social impact, and impeccable leadership. Donna, thank you so much for joining me today in All About Business.
Thank you for inviting me.
On the sofa there. I should declare to our listeners that I know you well because we've worked together for many, many years. But I thought that you would have a lot of insight to share that people would find really helpful, which is why I've invited you to come and talk to me. So Donna, you joined Reed in Partnership, a company I founded, I guess, back in 1998, not long after it was started, in an entry-level job as an employment advisor, which is a role that involves helping people who've been unemployed for long periods of time get back into work. So for people listening, that's the sort of shop floor equivalent, really, if you were working in a factory or a shop. You joined as an employment advisor. You are now the managing director of Reed in Partnership, some 2 decades later. And I'm very happy to share a very good and dynamic and successful managing director. And I've invited you to come and talk to me because I love this story, your journey, which I find very inspiring, that someone who started on the shop floor then ends up running the company. And I'd like that to be a journey that many other people make. So our reason for talking today is for you to share your experience and wisdom around that. So tell me first, how did it begin? What drew you to Reed in Partnership? And why have you progressed and stayed for as long as you have?
Well, thank you for inviting me and for your kind words, James. That's very nice of you to say. I joined the company in 2003. And it's actually quite interesting how that came about because I was working in Southend in Essex at the time. And I knew I wanted a new job, and I knew 2 things about that. I wanted to work in London, and I knew that I wanted to do a job that I thought was meaningful. I wanted to do something where I could help people. And I felt that I would be motivated by that more so than what I'd been doing up until that point. So I remember sitting at my desk at my current job, out of hours, of course, and decided that I'd go online and look for a job. And I thought, where do you go if you want to look for a job? And I thought, Reed, that's where I'm going to go. And it's quite interesting to me to think that it was literally the first place that I thought to look, on reed.co.uk. So I looked at a number of different vacancies, uploaded my CV, and then someone from Reed contacted me and talked to me about Reed in Partnership, which I'd not heard of. So I was aware of the Reed brand, but not Reed in Partnership. And they spoke to me about an opportunity in East London, in Stratford, doing the role that you just described as an employment advisor. And I was really excited about it. I remember thinking, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I wanted to support people that on that particular programme had been unemployed for 2+ years, and, helping them to address any barriers or practical issues that were preventing them from getting back to work. And so I went through quite a big assessment process actually at the time. I remember finding that quite challenging, but I was very, very pleased to be offered the job, and I did that for 2.5 years. And I would say it's probably the job of all of the jobs that I've had in Reed, the one that I used to talk about the most to people outside of work, about how challenging it was, but how rewarding it was. And I learned an enormous amount doing that,
So I remember that office that you started working in. It no longer exists. It was a sort of shed near the railway station in Stratford. And this is obviously before the London Olympics, before Stratford got that huge investment to improve the area. It was a very deprived area. And you haven't really gone into detail, but this was a tough job. You were seeing people, you would have had a caseload of people who were very disadvantaged and in some cases facing real challenges and difficulties. Why did you like this so much?
I'm interested in people and the stories that they have to tell and the situations that they find themselves in. And I like to have the opportunity to help in some way. I'm not sure how, as somebody in their early 20s, how absolutely qualified I was to be quite honest. But I really wanted to, and I thought that I was quite resourceful, and I wanted to apply that to helping these people. And I learned an enormous amount from them. I remember some of the people that I was working with, and some of the dreadful situations that they found themselves in. You think about people who have been out of work for a long time, but I think I've heard you say before, there's every person who's unemployed is unemployed for a different reason. And, I remember a lady who'd come to this country from China, and she'd lost everything in a fire. And she was personally injured by that and had come through that by the time she came to me. But it was quite clear that she was suffering from PTSD. I remember somebody else who I was working with to help find work, and he'd been agoraphobic and hadn't left his house for many years, and was now at the point where he was starting to take small steps really to sort of integrate back into wider society. And he was coming to me every 2 weeks to talk about getting a job. But it was quite clear to me that he was such a long way away from being able to go to work. So I learned that every person that's in front of you is at a different point in their journey. And the best way to help them is to help them take that next step. And ultimately, you will get a certain number of people, help them into jobs and staying there. But you can help every single person that is in front of you in some way. And sometimes it's just about listening to them and being there. And I think people really appreciate being heard. I really believe that being listened to is incredibly powerful. And if you can do that as an advisor, then I think you build the right relationships to help people move forward.
We're delighted that you're watching this episode. Please hit the subscribe button if you'd like to receive more insights and actionable advice that will help your business and/or career.
People listening won't necessarily know all about Reed in Partnership to the extent that I do and you do, but can you give us a sense of that? What is it that Reed in Partnership is currently doing, and what's the scale of it, just so people know the kind of organisation you're running?
So we're delivering public services in 5 markets now. We started in employability, as we've talked about, helping unemployed people find work. Employability is a bit broader than that now, but it's still out.
So how many unemployed people have you helped find work?
300,000, I think now it is, since the organisation started in 1998. So that's an enormous number. So employability is still our largest division, but we have sought to grow and diversify and sort of increase our impact, really. So we now operate Read Wellbeing, so preventative health services such as weight management, diabetes prevention, smoking cessation. We've got our Read Citizen Services division, where we've got services helping people leaving the armed forces, for example, a range of different services, including youth programs in there. Read Assessment is our invigilated training division. So if anyone has attempted to do their driving theory test, the chances are they would have done that in one of our test centres. So we've got test centres across 2/3 of the UK, and we've done more than 6.5 million of those tests, which is incredible. And then our most recent division is Read Environment. So this is around skills training for people in green skills to help the UK achieve its net zero ambition. So that's our most recent venture. So we're helping literally millions of people every year across all of our services now.
I mean, that's a huge amount for you to get your head around as managing director.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Not sure.
Come on, Donna. You obviously work really hard, but yeah, and we're adding things. So we're now doing green engineers and retrofit specialists, and I mean, you must be good at delegating.
Yeah, so having two things. One, I've grown with the company as all of that growth has taken place. Now that really helps because you're not stepping into this very sort of complex environment. And I'm always really impressed by people who do join the organisation and sort of grapple with that level of complexity. But yeah, it is about having a really, really talented team of people around you. So the board, the senior leadership team, which is a team of sort of 60 odd people, and we simply wouldn't achieve the results that we do without that talented team. They are, I'm very proud of them, very impressed by them, I have to say.
So you put a lot of time and focus into selecting your team, I'm thinking. And you look for what you would call an inclusive team. Could you just summarise that, just for the benefit of people listening?
Inclusive, a bit specifically? Well,
just you said earlier that you wanted diversity of all sorts. I mean, how does that work now as managing director? Are you bringing people from outside the organisation as well as inside promoting? So how do you make sure you have that diversity and range of abilities in the team?
We have to measure it, first of all.
How do you make sure that you're not the only woman on the board? Because,
yeah, absolutely. So we measure this at every level within the organisation. So we'll look at sort of women in leadership, women in management positions. And we do the same across our other areas of focus from a diversity perspective. So we measure ethnicity, for example.
So it's important to see how the organisation is shaped overall and how people are progressing up through it.
Yes.
Because that will give you the diversity that you need at the top.
Yes, and we need to make sure that everybody at every level has that opportunity to progress and really focus on that, make sure that we've got the right mix at every layer, if you like, in the hierarchy.
Because I'm sure people want to work in an organisation that has lots of opportunities for them. I mean, that's what you've shown yourself. You've been with us 20 years because you've been able to do all these different things partly.
Well, I think that's exactly what people want, isn't it? And, I'm working with other people in the senior leadership team that started in this organisation as, on the shop floor. And what I really want is, for what's happened to me to happen to them. I want to see plenty of other people doing exactly that journey. I think promoting from within, as you talked about earlier, is really very powerful, I think. And, in the way that I just described about me, you get people that can understand the organisation in such a sort of profound way from doing that. It's helpful. It is important not to just exclusively do that, though. I mean, it might be that if you're diversifying into a different market, you might need somebody who's got experience that you simply don't have. And if you're trying to do something that you've never done before, as we've discovered, it's pretty handy to have someone around that can help you learn some of the lessons more quickly.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, we want to create opportunities for people in the company, I would say.
Is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of your own experience that would be helpful to others that you feel?
Yeah, there is actually one thing, and that is, I think, it's basically, I would like to say to people, don't hold yourself back. because we talked a lot about sort of the external environment and barriers that might be in people's way. But actually, I think for most people, the biggest kind of blocker for their success is that they might not feel ready or able to take on a new responsibility. And that feeling, I think, people talk about it as being imposter syndrome or whatever, but that feeling can be quite powerful for people. And all I would say is, you might think, oh, is this really me? Am I really right for this? But I think it's really important to back yourself and give it a go. And that would be my message to people. Don't let fear of failure or worrying that you're not 100% the right fit for something stop you from giving it a try, because I believe in, that voice inside you that might say to you that you can't do something. You can silence it pretty quickly, I think, if you just get stuck in. So that would be my message to people.
There's a wonderful quote I read somewhere: the more you listen, the more the universe reveals itself to you. And I think listening is, I would agree, very important in all sorts of ways. But you were obviously good at this job.
I wasn't first.
So, yeah, what did it take to be successful from an advisor's perspective? Listening clearly, but how did you obviously got lots of people into work?
Yes, I mean we work in a targeted environment. We deliver services that are measured. We have to measure how effective they are, and so that was measured in terms of the number of people that each individual supports into work, and that's right. That the quality of services are measured in that way. I was working with people that had done this job for quite a long time, and so I made it my business to learn from them and understand some of their techniques, particularly when it came to working with employers, helping employers to understand the benefits of helping people into jobs who'd not been working for a period of time, for example. I think for me, the central point as an advisor, though, is building trust with the person that you are working with and helping them to understand that you've got shared goals. And once I learned some of the sort of practical techniques of the people around me, sorry about that, some of the practical techniques of the people around me, I think when you pull those things together, then all of a sudden it sort of clicks. Your own method of doing that job sort of clicks.
I mean, there'll be employers listening. You made an interesting point about why they should consider taking on people who've been out of work for periods of time. What would be your message to them?
People who've been unemployed for a period of time are often unemployed for a long time because it's so difficult to convince an employer to take them on. It's no reflection at all on their skills or ability or mindset. And it's sort of a bit self-fulfilling. The longer it goes on, the harder it is for them. And I think the experience of being unemployed should make somebody, from the point of view of an employer, eminently more employable, because they will be absolutely determined to do their best and retain that job with you. It's the right person to give an opportunity to.
Because that job is so much more valuable to them that they really appreciate it, they want to hold on to it, and they're likely to stay.
And they've experienced the difficulty of being out of.
That's very interesting, because I think a lot of people don't see that. But you saw that, and you placed your trust in the people you were working with, and you were able to help them progress.
Not everyone, but the idea is to help somebody get closer to a goal, always to be moving forward.
So how did you progress from here? So what happened next?
So I decided that after 2.5 years in that job, that I would like to think about managing a team of people doing that job. So, full disclosure, I wasn't, as an advisor, thinking, I want to be the MD one day. That was never in my mind at all. I was only ever really thinking about what my next challenge.
Your next step, yeah. So you thought management would be a good thing to do next.
So let me get into a management job and see if I can help other people. Again, it's that kind of helping people theme. If I can help my team to be successful. And so I moved into what was called a business manager role, managing a branch of people.
How many people would that be?
It ranged, because I did several different business manager roles, but my teams varied from sort of 6, 7 to 13.
A bit like a sergeant in the military. Yeah. Yeah. You had a good team that was. So what did you learn doing that? Well,
managing people is a bit of an art form, isn't it? And you're never really fully accomplished as a manager, I don't think. It's something that you're constantly learning. I learned that the importance of having the right people around you. You're only really as successful because you're surrounded by really good people. And I learned a lot about the importance of having a diverse team in all ways, all forms of diversity.
So explain that. What did you see?
Diverse teams in terms of every sense. So gender, ethnicity, age, psychological type, all of that. If you've particularly working in East London, I ended up working with very diverse teams, and I think you get the very best of talent and ideas if you've got a group of people who work together but come at things from very different angles and perspectives. And I think if you can combine all of those things, you definitely get to better outcomes working together. And I learned that. And I also learned early on that creating a safe environment for people is massively important for them to be able to do well. So, we worked in a target-orientated environment, as I've already said, but the last thing that you want to do as a manager is create a sort of sense of fear about failure in that regard. So it's about realising that you're collectively aiming for targets and outcomes, but doing so in such a way that people don't feel fearful of failure. And that's something that I've sort of tried to carry through every stage, really, of my career.
How do you do that? That's a fine art, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not particularly easy, but I think, first of all, choose people that you've got confident, that you feel that you can place your confidence and trust in. And you take responsibility yourself when things don't go well. And demonstrate to your people that if things go wrong, you're going to be standing there next to them and help them improve and develop and do better next time. And I think if you can do that, you build trust with people, and ultimately you get better results in the long term.
So listening to you, you're sort of acquiring sort of knowledge and skills as you progress, but your passion for sort of helping people and working with people was the core and the starting point, and then you're accumulating this knowledge from your jobs. So you became a manager, and then your management roles became larger, and then you became operations director, which is that's taking accountability for the whole operation. That's a big step up. How did that? Talk me through that and how you felt about that and how that happened.
That's quite a big mindset shift at that point. I would say there's two really big mindset shifts for me in my journey. That was one, and the next was actually stepping into MD, which perhaps we'll talk a bit about.
We'll come to that next. So you move from manager, you're running successful groups of people, but then you're becoming operations, becoming a director, I suppose. So you've gone from advisor to manager, now director. So
that was an interesting move. So that was in 2014. At the point that I joined the board, I was the only woman on the board, and I was the youngest person on the board as well. And I was sort of mentally grappling with the idea that you are responsible in quite a different way as a director, aren't you? Sort of everything really that happens in the company, in some way you have oversight and responsibility for. So, you've got your functional responsibility in terms of my case, operations, but then there's the whole organisation and from every perspective. And yeah, that's quite a big change, I would say, in terms of how I thought about my job. What I would say is one of the things that helps you to progress in a company, I think, is being able to see the company as a whole organisation and not just yourself in a department within it. And I think that really comes to the fore when you step into a board role, because you've got those sort of two focuses, if you like.
But how many people were you responsible for as operations director at that time?
I think it's grown considerably during that 10-year period. So I think at the lowest point we were a team of about 500, and then when I was operations director at the peak, which we're still at now, it was about 2,300.
So the company's grown hugely over your period as director. So then you said, the next step, or the big change, was becoming managing director. What's the big change from operations to managing director? Explain that. When
you're on the board as an operations director, clearly you're managing a large section of the business, and you've got a large responsibility in terms of the performance of the business, and you're contributing to the conversation around strategy, and so you're very much at the table. But as managing director, essentially you're owning that to a much greater extent. So working with a team of people across all different functions, so the finance director, business development, the people teams, all of this then becomes your responsibility. And I think pulling that together and being able to articulate a coherent strategy, I think is a much different responsibility from the operations director job that I'd had before. And I knew that to be the case when I walked into the job. And then very shortly after taking it on was sort of moved straight into our strategy process. So it gave me the opportunity to sort of get stuck straight into that.
So strategy is really at the forefront, when you're managing director, in a way that it wasn't perhaps before.
Yeah, I'll just add.
That's a new skill, though, isn't it? You have to acquire.
It is. And I think, when sometimes strategy feels a bit abstract, right? But for me, it's about thinking further ahead, essentially. So, as operations director, I'm thinking about business results in the more immediate, short to immediate term. As managing director, I'm thinking about, what are we doing in 3-5 years' time? And that's
good. I'm hoping you're thinking about that. Someone's got to. That's what I'm thinking about as well.
Yeah. So that's quite a big shift. And you'd spend much, much more of your time in that sort of space, if you like. And
that takes imagination, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's a different skill again.
But it's not, you're not, thank goodness, you're not doing it all by yourself. There's lots of really talented people around. And the other point I'd like to make about that is you're looking externally a lot more. So I find myself needing to know what's going on, like politically, for example, much more about our customers' strategy, other competitors, other stakeholders. So
yeah, employers and other organisations, what they're doing. So on that sort of journey, your personal journey from advisor to managing director, I imagine you had to compete for jobs. So how if you're thinking of a young person in their 20s, how do you get noticed? How do you make yourself the best candidate in those situations? What should people be trying to take from your journey that they can use on their own?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to be really good at the job that you've got, first of all. Aim to be the best. And I don't mean best in a competitive way with others. I mean the best that you can be. Get good results. I think the second thing is, I'm going to choose my words carefully here. Work for your manager. It's really important to understand your manager's priorities, help them to be successful, because they've got aims and objectives, obviously, that help the business itself to be successful. So work for your manager, and your manager can end up being your biggest ally, if you can help them to achieve. Understand the wider context, know about the company, know about what it is that the overall organisation is trying to achieve. Don't just think about your own department or business unit. Try to understand more broadly. And within that, know which role you want your next job to be. That's what I always did. As I mentioned to you earlier, it wasn't working backwards from MD. I was thinking, right, what's next for me? And even if that job's not available right now, get yourself ready for it. Think, okay, talk to people, build your network, understand what are the skills, the knowledge that you need, and have a plan for that. And in terms of getting yourself noticed, I think I notice people who get things done. That sounds a bit basic, but I notice problem solvers. I notice people who make difficult things easy rather than the opposite.
Sure.
Frankly.
And they're actually quite rare. I mean, lots of people present problems, not so many come with solutions.
That's right. And I think that can do attitude and resourcefulness. And really aligning yourself. People stand out to me when they really align themselves with what the business is trying to achieve. And, not everybody will agree with me, but I'm not necessarily looking for people who are hugely personally ambitious. I want people who are there because they want to make the company succeed. That's what I've always wanted. It might be different in different companies. Different leaders might want different things, but that's what I want. I want people that want to work as a team and make the company the best that it can possibly be. And if I see that in people, then they can come on a nice journey, I think.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, for companies to try and create opportunities for people. And at Reed, we like to promote people from within whenever possible. And you're a good example of that. but the people need to be on the journey
They
as
do.
well.
They do. And you achieve personal success by being on that journey. That's kind of the point from my perspective.
When do you feel, when you're in a job, that it's the right moment to move on? Maybe it's to move into a new role, or move. How do you time that correctly? Or move up or move out, or in a career, when.
I'm
Your
not sure there
experience,
is
do you
a straightforward answer to that. I mean, I'm obviously someone who's built a career staying in the same place, and I can honestly say that at any point that I've really felt, perhaps I'm not enjoying this role as much as I could do, or I'm not sure if I can really see where the next opportunity is coming from, something has opened up and happened and caused me to stay. It's happened consistently throughout my time, and I think that's credit to the company for the fact that those opportunities have been created and have come up. But it's equally possible, isn't it, to experience that feeling that I did and decide to move on and go somewhere else. I would say clearly I would advocate staying if you're confident that you're in a good company. There are risks to moving, of course. You might not choose well. But it's an internal thing. Only, you as an individual can know if you're at the point where you're perhaps, not feeling as motivated every day as you need to be. And I think it is really important to enjoy what you're doing on a daily basis. That's...
Yeah, so do I. If we now sort of step out of the individual who wants to progress his head and think about managers who want to spot talent. And sort of, if you want to bring people on in your organization and look for people, and you've sort of half answered this, but you're obviously looking for a can-do approach, but what other advice would you give to managers in terms of, do you believe in succession plans? Do you believe in, sort of flagging people as fast track, these sort of things that some companies do, or do you think it's a different approach?
Yes, I think it can be helpful. That's quite difficult to do because people's talent emerges at different times. So I think you just need to make sure you're flexible. But there will always inevitably be people that quite clearly have potential, and you want to create opportunity for them quite obviously. And I think...
Well, that's hard to spot in a company of 2,300 people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And they're all over the place. And you don't know. It gets harder, I find, as a business gets bigger. When you're starting out as an entrepreneur and you've got 10 people in a room and you know everyone personally, you can sort of see. But how do you do it as it gets bigger? How does that work?
Well, I think you do need to make sure that you're talking to people at all levels, all of your management team at all levels, about the importance of that. You need to create opportunity, I suppose, two ways. Create opportunities for people to get involved in things beyond their jobs. So projects, secondment opportunities, things that people can volunteer for or be nominated for that gets them sort of the exposure and they can be noticed. The other thing, I think, as a leader is that you just need to create as many opportunities as you can to interact with your people.
So what sort of opportunities are you thinking of?
So you might want to, we're not only just going and seeing what they're doing and talking to them, but we, for example, run focus groups, and we regularly create opportunities for us as a team of directors to engage with people in the organisation, to ask their ideas, their feedback.
How does a focus group work?
So, for example, in January, the directors all went on visits across the whole country, brought together groups of people to ask them questions to inform our strategy. So we would ask them things around how can we accelerate performance? What can we do to make this a better place to work? A range of different questions, and send them to people in advance and then have a conversation and engage people. And from that, you can start to pick out or meet people who are very curious and clearly have put thought into things and come up with good ideas.
So that has a double benefit in a sense, is you're spotting people who are coming forward and suggesting things and have ideas and are showing potential, but you're also acquiring lots of new ideas for the strategy.
Well, absolutely.
So sort of getting out there is a good thing for other businesses to really build into their calendar.
Well, look,
business leaders.
We can't possibly know the right way forward on every point from the boardroom. It's absurd to think that, in a way, I think.
You've developed, since your time in operations and now as managing director, a very active culture of continuous improvement, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely.
And that has informed the strategy, and that also helps surface future leaders, you would say. So what should someone who's thinking about this, how would you start on that continuous improvement track, if that's something you want to do?
For me, continuous improvement starts with an attitude, with a mindset. I mean, right at the very beginning, because you can't continuously improve if you can't bear the thought of ever being wrong. I mean, you need to be able to accept.
That's an important starting point.
It really is. And you'd be surprised how many people find it hard to get past that point, that place. You know, if you want to do well, you have to look in the mirror and think, oh, I didn't do that particularly well this time. Next time it's going to be better. And then you apply that principle to the whole organisation, which is, we can make this service better. You know, we can get better results. And
I was lucky enough years and years ago to go to Harvard Business School. And on the last day, after spending a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of time on this course for the MBA, our finest professor said to us, 50% of what you've learned here will be wrong. And we don't know what 50% it is. And in a way, that was the best lesson, because it makes you continuously curious as you go out into the world, thinking, well, I think this is right, but am I wrong? And I think that's so important, that you know, good ideas come from everywhere and everyone. And what you're doing today might not be the right thing, and it might be wrong. And you can continuously improve it. And I think you've found that through your own work to be the case.
Yeah. Well, I found it through personal experience too. It applies to you as an individual. You know, you can't get better at something unless you really identify where.
Why is that a blockage for so many people, do you think?
Some sort of maybe.
Is it a confidence thing?
Confidence is one side of it. I think there's a cultural point. I think, you know, you have to create a culture where it's okay to be wrong. People don't feel frightened to say, I've not done this terribly well. And we can say, okay, all right.
Because, looking around, in business and all sorts of walks of life, things aren't run as well as they could be. I mean, it should be, obvious that things are going wrong in all sorts of places.
Yeah, I mean, focus on the solution, though. Focus on the answer. And then, you can always lift the trains afterwards and think, what happened here? But, focus on the solution, get the thing done, and then we can, worry about what caused problems later. I think it's back to that can-do attitude.
Do you think that's sometimes what happens? People are fixated on what caused this or who was at fault, rather than let's get it fixed and move on?
Yes, I think that is the case.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from that's a cultural problem, in the sense that people are worried about the consequences for them as an individual.
Yes.
Whereas what's really important is the consequences for the overall, for the company, getting things right and making sure.
Yeah, and for the customer and for the people experiencing the service. We want to go right for them. Because things, I think it's totally human, isn't it? We all know that things go wrong. And it's how people respond to that that's so important, in my experience.
Yes, and that ultimately helps you to be more successful more quickly. I read a book and it said, it's called Being Wrong by Karen Schultz. I really liked it. It was excellent. And she said the great thing about acknowledging when you're wrong is that you can more quickly start being right. I liked this piece of advice.
Yeah.
Just accept it, get on with it. And I wouldn't ever want for someone to be worried about coming to me, for example, and saying we've made a mistake.
That's something I've observed about you over the years, is you actually read a lot, and you've been self-taught in that sense. So your curiosity about how to run things and how to run a company and be in business, and you read a lot of things beyond business, I know. So I think I'm hearing that you would be recommending others to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. That curiosity point that we spoke about earlier, there is so much material available so readily. I just don't have time to read all of the things that I want to read, frankly. It's which disappoints me. But
you've hopefully got many years ahead of you.
Not enough hours in the day.
I know how that feels, but and so it's important to get good advice about what to read or recommendations.
But that curiosity, I love it when people come to me and say, "Oh, I've had this idea about this," and 9 times out of 10 we'll talk it through and think, perhaps that's not quite going to work. But the 1 time out of 10 that we can make it work, it can be quite transformational. And I really like people who have ideas in that way. Normally, it's because they're foraging around, reading, looking at things, thinking about what other businesses are doing, listening to people on podcasts, for example. And I really like that.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying this episode of All About Business. If you're feeling stuck in your career and want to start loving Mondays, sign up for our free careers course, Life's Work. Hosted by Steph and myself, it's jam-packed with the tools and resources you need to make your next career move. Join for free today. The link is in the show notes.
In my experience, ideas come from all over the place, don't they? And someone might be saying something on a podcast. You think, that's interesting. I wonder if I can apply that where I work. And then you connect it with another idea. And so having a sort of continual ferment of ideas is important. I mean, we like to say in our family, we should have a new idea every day. So that's a sort of mantra of ours. And this all helps, doesn't it?
It does.
You're exposed to more things.
It's quite difficult to have a good idea every day, I would say.
We don't say a good one, just an idea.
An idea, okay.
We don't know sometimes you don't know whether an idea is a good one for many, many years. So, so you have to give them time sometimes. And it might be just somewhere new to go for lunch. I mean, it doesn't have to be a groundbreaking idea. So you mentioned earlier when you became the operations director, Donna, that you were the only woman on the board and the youngest person on the board. That doesn't reflect well on me back in 2014, because I believe I was the chairman of the board back then, and we should have had a more diverse board. I'm pleased to say it's become more diverse.
Absolutely.
You have some views, I know, on women in leadership and leadership that I'd like you to share, because I think they're interesting.
There were women on the group board at that point, James. I was talking about the board of reading partners.
I know you were. No, but on the board you joined, you were the only woman. And, we seek to be, inclusive, obviously.
Absolutely.
And that's very important to us. And we have objectives around women in leadership and management, which we've made good progress on over that decade. But there's always, we can always do better, in the spirit of what we were saying earlier. And we want to do better. But you're an exemplar. So talk me through your thoughts on this.
Well, look, the first thing that I want to say, I think it's a really important caveat to make when you get into conversations about this, that I've got very, very good relationships with lots of men at work and outside of work, and anything that I'm about to say is not intended to offend any single individual man. But I think you do have to...
Don't hold back, Donna. I think you say what your experience is.
You have to sometimes sort of confront these things. Now, women in leadership, obviously women face some structural, let's say, sort of logistic even challenges. So women who choose to have a family and find it difficult, obviously, in salary and progression terms to recover from a break. Often women are more likely to be than men part-time workers, and that can affect their progression at work. And so there definitely are these sort of structural problems that, thankfully, businesses are waking up to and are seeking to address, which I think is fantastic. But let's be really honest. The problem isn't a structural one. The problem is a historic one relating to, over centuries and centuries, how people have felt about women. And it's that bias against women that holds women back principally in the workplace, because there are stereotypes about women and whether or not women should be in leadership roles, or what they shouldn't be doing, that more or less consciously people still carry around in their minds when they're making hiring decisions or promoting decisions. And I think that's when we talk about the women in leadership, it's that we need to think about. I have to say my experience at Reed has been absolutely brilliant. I don't feel like I've ever been in situations within working for the company where I felt that I've been treated in a sexist way. There have been things that have happened when I've been dealing with clients, or, moments at work where I felt perhaps some unconscious bias has crept in. But I don't feel like there's ever been actual barriers to me. But there are in plenty of companies and different sectors. If you think about women in, science and technology, for example, it's, really quite a different experience perhaps from the one that I've had. And I think all I would say is I think it's really important to recognise that whilst we've made massive improvements in this, the problem hasn't gone away. And I'm not somebody who goes around talking about this very often. You've probably noticed. I
have noticed, but that's why I wanted to hear what you thought.
But I think it is, when I talk to a lot of men, or if I ever do, men are surprised about this, and that is frankly male privilege, because men haven't
had the experience.
Yeah. And so I think it's really important when women want to progress and move into leadership roles, that they recognise that they will come up against certain behaviours, and they have a decision to make about whether to ignore it or to choose to educate. But one thing I would say is don't ever let it put you off. So,
Yes.
However you choose to react, just don't let it put you off. Don't ever let it make you feel that you shouldn't be in the room, because it's that self-deselection, I think, that is that silent self-deselection.
And do you see that? I mean, do you see that yourself in women in our business, or might be deselecting, and we have to
I think you have to make sure.
address that?
I'm not sure if women are even necessarily completely conscious when they do that. I think it just manifests itself as like a sort of imposter syndrome. I shouldn't be here, I shouldn't be in this room or in this group. And I think it's just around, it just requires a little bit of determination. I mean, it's quite unfortunately common. If you turn up at a meeting with a male colleague, that the people that you meet might assume that person is more senior than you because he's a man.
So this happens to you now?
Oh, yeah.
So you go and visit someone, some company, and you're with a man, and they
Oh, yeah, they'll automatically
think he's more senior than you, and actually it's the other way around.
Yeah, and so you've got a choice to make in that instance. My choice is always to just explain, actually, this is the hierarchy.
That guy works for me.
Yeah. And it's almost a bit awkward, isn't it? You've got the person next to you. Like,
Who's my coach? Is that what you're doing? Well, it's a good deal.
Yeah. So it can be a little bit strange. Or, in fact, I've been out to an external meeting with a previous manager of mine, and, on more than one occasion, people assume that I was his assistant. It's, which is, fine, but I don't see why
These
people
assumptions.
do that.
Yeah, well, that's the old adage, isn't it? Assume makes an ass out of you and me. I mean, it's sort of exactly that in those cases. Yeah. So this is really embedded, is what you're saying.
It is. People
And the fact that we all need to be more aware of it is
Yes.
clearly your message. We'll all do a better job if we are more aware of it.
That's it. And, it's more or less subtle and probably not deliberate, ingrained from centuries of this stereotyping of what women, are or ought to be. And, I reiterate, I've had a really good experience at Reed.
There's an experience that I've observed where in a meeting, board meeting, a woman suggests something or comes up with an idea, and it's sort of hardly acknowledged. And then one of the men sitting around the table somewhat later says something extremely similar. And everyone goes, oh, that was very interesting.
Absolutely.
You've seen that. I've seen that. So what's that about? And should you say, actually, I just said that? Is that the right response?
I think that is the right answer.
Oh, yeah. And I think a chair of a meeting should say,
Yeah.
actually, Donna said that 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. What's changed in the last
Yeah, so I think anyone running a meeting should be super alert.
I think
to
so.
that.
Yeah, they should, making sure that every voice is heard. And this goes right back to that diversity conversation that we were having about making sure that you've got that diversity of input, and a good chair or a good manager leader will pull that together to help you get to the right outcome. Being spoken over is the other thing.
Yeah. There's an old, I think it's a Native American saying that I remember hearing years ago. I've always liked, a hollow gourd makes the loudest sound.
There you go. Very good.
So, you don't want to necessarily give the floor to the loudest person. You certainly don't, actually. You want to make sure every voice
That's right.
is heard if you're running a meeting.
I think that is the answer, isn't it? That from a diversity perspective. I've certainly, I've struggled quite literally in the sense that I have got quite a quiet voice and have to find myself projecting quite a lot, which can be a little bit exhausting. So it's always quite refreshing when you're in a meeting and you know that the person leading the group is wanting to hear from you.
Yeah. Sometimes I think my wife Nicola's a teacher, and she's taught in some pretty rough and rowdy schools, and she's only 5'3". And I say to her, how do you get control of the class? And she says, sometimes I go up to the front of the room and I just stand there and I don't say anything and I wait. And after sometimes 3 or 4 minutes, they all go quiet because they become curious as to what you're going to do, what you're going to say. I think this is a very good technique. And I think silence sometimes is extremely powerful too. If you're getting or seeking attention. But obviously in a context of a group, you need to make sure everyone has a voice. And I think we all have a duty to listen as well.
I agree. And to the point about, the person speaking the loudest, I think if you've got good ideas, and you're prepared to take your opportunities to state them, I don't think that these things could.
So don't be your message is don't be discouraged if
Yes.
you're not loud and sort of extrovert. You still have an important contribution.
Yes, yeah, and don't try to be what you're not. I'm not a big, loud extrovert, and if I tried to be one, it would be ridiculous, frankly. So, I really would have advocated being authentic. The person that I am at work is the same person that's talking to you now, and it's really important to me that people see authenticity. I think better leaders are authentic, and so I don't try and mould myself into anyone else.
You're true to yourself.
Yeah.
And what I've observed, that passion you had when you started all those years ago for working with people and helping people regress is every bit as bright and powerful, if not more so now. I mean, you've really carried that forward. Is that your prime motivation still?
Yeah, it is. It's grown. It was down to individuals, helping individuals in that first instance. Then it became teams, and now it's become helping the organisation to succeed, and the impact that we have, across all of our services and all the people that we deliver services to.
So, Donna, if we think about individuals who are sort of immersed in a job and they want to progress, they're thinking about their next move, how might they prepare themselves most effectively, with the 6 months, 3 years, 5 years sort of time frames in mind? Because these are often what people are asked in appraisals and things.
Yes, or in a job interview, you might be asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
You might be asked that, yes.
Okay. I think 5 years is quite long, reflecting on this just now. It's a bit of a historical question, isn't it? Not in the context of a job interview, I mean in a job appraisal. 5 years feels quite long in modern business. So perhaps people should be thinking about a shorter time frame, that's 6 months, perhaps 3 years. I think people can benefit from recognising that progression is not all about your next promotion. You can progress in the job that you've got, and you can get yourself ready for that next promotion. So I advocate treating yourself as a project. So identify the skills and experiences that you think you want to obtain in order to progress, in order to get yourself closer to that next job when it comes along. And you can find various ways of gaining those skills. You can shadow people, you can look for secondment opportunities, you can join projects that sit alongside your current job. Our business certainly, but I imagine that most businesses provide those sorts of opportunities. So if you know what it is that you want to do, you can tick those things off on your plan. And then when the next role comes along, you can be ready for it. It's not always possible in a company to know exactly what or where your next move is going to be. But making sure that you're continuously developing and acquiring skills along the way is important, I think.
Yeah, where preparation meets opportunity. That's what people call luck, isn't it? So that's what you're saying, and you can't know because business is changing so fast. So position yourself as someone who's improving and adaptable.
Well, I wasn't expecting to be managing director, just over a year ago. So, but I wanted to be ready at the point that opportunity came along. So,
and you were the strongest candidate.
So it's sort of lived experience for me, really, making sure that you're thinking about that and getting yourself ready for when that moment happens, even if it's unexpected.
Sure.
So,
well, that's very useful advice. Now, you were talking earlier about people who sort of don't get anything wrong and sort of know-it-alls. I mean, the other side of that coin is someone who, apparently doesn't know anything, and they're always asking questions and doesn't seem to be able to sort of settle upon the fact that they've got to go out and do something. Have you seen that? Have you come across that?
People who sort of seek reassurance quite a lot through asking questions to establish every detail. Yes. I think once you've spotted that, I think if you recognise that it comes from a position of anxiety or, perhaps self-confidence, self-doubt, then I think that's the conversation to have, rather than answering every specific question and saying, I'm trusting you to do this. And if you come up with the wrong answer, that's fine. We can talk about it, but encouraging people to go and find the answers for themselves in certain ways.
That's very interesting. So you've found that to be the way to deal with that. Otherwise, you're just endlessly answering questions, I suppose.
Well, questions that I might not be able to answer because actually I'm asking that person to go and
find out what the answer is. Yeah.
Precisely. But I think if you recognise it as being a sort of fundamentally a self-confidence or an anxiety related.
So in a way, both those problems are to do with confidence and anxiety. Yeah, I know it all because I don't want to show that I'm weak.
Yeah.
Or I
don't know anything.
I don't know anything, so I've got to ask lots of questions. And understanding of realizing that is very helpful for managers, because we're all on a journey. We can't possibly know all the answers, but we know something. And I suppose as a decision maker, you have to make decisions all the time, don't you? With imperfect knowledge, with you know some stuff, but you don't know everything you'd like to know.
Absolutely.
And that's something you learn over time as a leader, isn't it?
It absolutely it is. And I back against what we were talking about around that culture of continuous improvement. We all know that we're not at our best when we're feeling anxious in either direction in that you've just described, or in a situation of imperfect knowledge where we've got to make a decision and there are consequences. But if you are in an environment where you don't feel that there are going to be dreadful personal ramifications of you making a mistake, if you've got that confidence that people are backing you, you're much freer to make a good decision, I think. And I think that cultural point is really important. I think self-confidence is such a massive enabler for people. When you're not feeling confident, everything about your performance gets worse. So, it just does. And so you need
in every walk of life.
Absolutely.
Really.
And so trying to create an environment, I've seen people in our organisation progress and do things that they didn't believe that they could do. And the massive confidence boost that they get from that is a joy to see, really.
You also see it with our participants when they progress into a job after being unemployed for a long time.
Absolutely.
That's what's so rewarding about it.
It's really motivating to see people do well, I think. I really enjoy that.
So do I. So, Donna, I'm going to ask you two questions that I ask all of our guests. And the first question is, what gets you up on a Monday morning?
I don't have any problems getting out of bed on a Monday morning. I don't experience any kind of reluctance to get up and do my job. I love what I do. I love my job. I love the fact that I get the opportunity to work with a great team of people, and I get a lot of autonomy and I can make decisions. And I love the fact that the work we do is meaningful and has impact. If you were asking the question literally, I think, like I said earlier, I think it's so important to do a job that you love, and I really do love mine. And I think anyone that knows me personally well would say that that's really quite obvious. So.
That's good. So you're loving Mondays, which is good.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Mondays are working for you, Donna. I can say, it ain't easy to be cheesy as they say. Donna loves Mondays. That's good. That's good. I'm pleased to hear it. So the second question I'm going to ask you is one of the questions from my interview, one of the fateful 15. You'd have been asked it before. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Well, I've been doing this job for a year nearly, believe it or not, which is quite astonishing. The year's gone past very quickly. So if I imagine, another 5 years like that, it's going to come around quite quick. First of all, I would, if it means that I'm still in the current job that I'm doing, I'd be very happy. But I would like to think that the company would be even bigger and better by then. I'd like to see, I'd like to be managing director of Reading Partnership, but in a completely different size and shape, running more services in more divisions to more and more people across the country. I would be very motivated by that outcome. I mean, I'll certainly still see myself in a senior role in business. I'm not planning within the next 5 years to go and sit on a mountain in Peru, but I might do that at some point in the future.
Peru is a beautiful country.
It is.
Okay, Donna, thank you very much. Thank you to Donna for joining me on All About Business. If you'd like to find out more about Donna, you can follow her on LinkedIn. I'm your host, James Reed, Chairman and CEO of Reed, a family-run recruitment and philanthropy company. If you'd like to find out more about careers at Reed, check out our current job opportunities on our website. All links are in the show notes. See you next time.